أهلا وسهلا فيكم متابعينا بحلقة جديدة من برنامج يلا. بحلقة اليوم رح نحكي عن وجهة نظر الإدارة الأمريكية عن الحرب بين إسرائيل وحماس بعد الهجمات الإرهابية اللي قامت فيها حماس على إسرائيل، وعن دور الولايات المتحدة في مواجهة التهديدات الأمنية الحاصلة في منطقة الشرق الأوسط من قبل الميليشيات المدعومة من قبل النظام الإيراني، وطبعا عن بعض التطورات الإيجابية اللي أيضا عم تصير بالمنطقة واللي بدنا نعرف وجهة نظر الإدارة الأمريكية فيها. للحديث حول هذه القضايا ينضم إلينا المتحدث الرسمي ونائب مدير منطقة الشرق الأدنى في وزارة الخارجية الأمريكية سيجلمان لنحكي أكثر عن هي القضايا. Thank you so much for joining us today, Adam.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to start, if you can elaborate on the U.S. administration's position and view and reflections, of course, on the terrorist attacks by Hamas against Israel on October 7th. Horrific things happened, and there's hostages still taken. And now also there's basically the Israel-Hamas war. How would you describe to us your position on all of the above? I know it's a lot to unpack.
Sure. Well, I think our position has been quite clear from the very beginning. First and foremost, to condemn the heinous attacks committed by Hamas against Israeli and other citizens and the taking of hostages. We've been very clear from the get-go that Hamas should free all the hostages that they continue to keep in Gaza, and that Israel has a right, as any country, the United States or other countries in the world, to defend itself. And there's no country in the world that would allow a terrorist attack on its borders like that to occur and then have those terrorists continue to control that territory. So Israel has a right to defend itself. And at the same time, it must do so, as the President has said, as the Secretary has said, while respecting the rule of the law of war and international humanitarian law. So how Israel does that is very important. So we're working with them to make sure that that happens. And at the same time, obviously, because of this conflict, it's created an incredibly terrible and sad humanitarian crisis. And so a huge part of what the administration has been trying to do is address that humanitarian crisis, make sure that aid can enter Gaza, that it can reach the people who need it, that fuel can enter Gaza, that the Palestinians of Gaza can have water that they need, shelter, and that they can find places where they can stay safe away from the conflict. At the same time, while all this is going on, we have to create a situation in which October 7th can never happen again. And the best way to do that is to create a better vision for the future. And that vision is the same vision that the United States and most of the world has supported for decades, and it's a future, free, prosperous, independent Palestinian state that's united, West Bank and Gaza, where all Palestinians can live freely, can elect their own leaders, can live a prosperous and dignified life that they seek.
We saw an increase in attacks by Iranian-backed militias in the Middle East, and we saw the Houthis attacking U.S. ships, which is increasingly happening. Of course, there was also attacks by Hezbollah and the Houthis against Israel happening after the October 7th terrorist attack. How do you kind of connect the dots in terms of Hamas also being an Iranian-backed militia?
Yeah, thanks for that question, because that's another very important goal of the United States that we've had since the attacks occurred on October 7th, and that is to keep this conflict from spreading. We've been very, very clear to any party, any actor, state or non-state, to not take advantage of the situation, to not open up another front of this conflict. And you're absolutely right. Iran continues to play a nefarious role in the region. They've always played a nefarious role in the region. What we're seeing now with the Houthis, who are backed by Iran, is a flagrant violation of international law and the maritime laws that allow the free flow of commerce that benefits not just the United States, but the entire world. And that's something we take very, very seriously. You may have seen last week that we applied sanctions on individuals who have supported the Houthis financially. And listen, we will do whatever it takes to protect our people, to protect our ships. And so we're working with our international partners to address this.
Since you mentioned the sanctioning of individuals who are supporting the Houthis today by the administration, were there any thoughts about maybe we shouldn't have taken the Houthis off of the sanctions list or designation as a terrorist organization? And are there any consideration to redesignate the Houthis as a terrorist organization in light of all of these recent developments and attacks?
Well, look, I don't want to relitigate past decisions. I will say, as I'm sure you may have seen in the news, there are conversations about whether we should redesignate the Houthis as a terrorist organization, conversations in the government, conversations in Congress. What I'll say is that we have to calibrate that decision with also our other goals for Yemen. We have our special envoy for Yemen, Tim Lenderking, who's currently traveling in the region. He's been working very, very hard to maintain the truce, the longest truce that we've had since, I think, in almost 10 years, and to ultimately help facilitate a peace deal that would give long-lasting peace and improve the lives of Yemenis and other region.
Knowing the continued support by the Iranian regime for Hamas since the 90s, how involved, in your opinion, was Iran in the October 7th terrorist attacks?
You know, I think this is a very interesting question, important question. It's a question I think that will take time to fully study. Let's make clear about one thing. Hamas would not exist as it currently exists without the support of Iran. Iran has supported them financially, logistically, for years. At the same time, we have seen no intelligence, no evidence of a direct Iranian involvement in October 7th. So October 7th probably wouldn't have happened. Hamas wouldn't exist and be powerful enough to do something like that without Iran, but the direct link, we haven't seen that evidence.
There are still over 100 Israeli hostages in the hands of Hamas held in Gaza today, some of whom are also American citizens. Mm-hmm. How is the administration basically preparing or planning on responding to this ongoing situation?
Well, I think first and foremost, we've been very clear. Hamas must release all the hostages, the Americans included, but we want them to release and urge them to release everyone. And we're working very closely with our partners. Qatar has been a huge help in terms of their mediation to secure the release of the hostages. We were able, with the help again of our partners and through our mediation, to have the humanitarian pause that existed a couple weeks ago. And we saw dozens of hostages released during that. We would support future humanitarian pauses that would allow not just the release of the hostages who must be released, but also increase of humanitarian aid. We were able to significantly increase the humanitarian aid that got in to help the Palestinians of Gaza during those humanitarian pauses, or the pause that occurred a couple weeks ago, and we need those to continue. But that also is going to depend on Hamas. Hamas needs to stop its attacks, and Hamas needs to allow those pauses to happen.
You mentioned the humanitarian aid, and there are videos circulating online right now of Palestinians who are basically talking about how Hamas is also stealing their aid. They're not getting the aid that is being delivered. How do you think the United States should respond to these situations where the people in need, the Palestinians in need of these humanitarian aids, are not getting them because of Hamas?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to stress the importance of this aid. And you know, we have gone through great lengths to try to negotiate the entry of aid through the Special Envoy for Humanitarian Affairs, David Satterfield, and we know that the aid has been getting in, but we also know that it's not enough. There needs to be more of it. We are very careful about the aid that we help get into Gaza to make sure that it does reach the people who need it the most, that it's not stolen. Now, any allegations, it wouldn't surprise us per se. We know that Hamas has taken from the Palestinian people of Gaza in the past, so it wouldn't surprise us if that was the case. We would take allegations seriously. But like I said, we have these procedures in place to make sure that the aid that we give or the aid that we help facilitate does reach the people who need it.
I wanted to also go back to the aid to the Palestinians in Gaza. What are the basically the different plans by the administration to continue helping the people in need, the civilians in Gaza, with aid today?
Well, as I mentioned, we have Ambassador Satterfield who continues to work to get more aid in. There's a number, I think the average of trucks, it changes each day. But we're in the around 100 range. That's way too little. We know that there needs to be many more trucks. So what are we doing? We're working very closely with the Egyptians have been instrumental in helping to get aid in through Rafah. We've been working with the Israelis to also look at other areas where aid and trucks can get in. And another thing that we're looking at doing is increasing the ability to inspect aid to get into Gaza. And of course, the United Nations is the one who on the ground who's helped providing water, food, shelter, all the basic necessities. We couldn't do it without them as well on the ground, actually helping to deliver the aid.
Hamas leaders are now hiding in Qatar in plain sight. And there are so many questions, are there any plans by the US administration to extradite these Hamas leaders and arrest them for their crimes against American citizens?
What I'll say to that is just going back to what the Secretary said is that we can't go back to the status quo of October 6th. So I'll just leave it at that.
We are, generally, Yalla is focused on positive news. And as you can imagine, this has been very hard, of course, for Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza, the civilians. I wanted to kind of go to something more optimistic and ask you about Saudi Arabia was just selected to be the host of the World Expo 2030. This comes after the 2020 Expo in Dubai, and Morocco's soccer team, men and women's, also dazzled the world in the World Cup. I wanted to ask you about your take on the direction of some of the countries in the Middle East in North Africa lately, where things have been also kind of heading in a more positive direction from, of course, what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, and thank you for that question. I mean, it is hard to focus on the positive when we're seeing so much destruction and suffering. At the same time, you're right, there are many countries in the Middle East that we do see opening up to the world, that we see competing in worldwide competitions. You mentioned the soccer team in Morocco. I lived in Algeria for 3 years when they won the Coupe d'Afrique, as well as I believe the Arab World Cup or the Arab Cup. And then you're seeing the expos, and you are kind of seeing this flourishing of commerce, of trade, of culture, of exchange. I can mention a number of U.S. universities that have now opened up campuses, both in North Africa and in the Gulf and elsewhere in the Levant as well. These are all positive developments, and this is all kind of going back to what I was talking about before, this need for integration, for opening, for connectivity, which benefits all of us. And so I hope we can see more of this. I do think we'll see more of this.
Because when we talk about the positive momentum, of course we cannot talk about the Abraham Accords and the peace that happened and all of the different relationships that were basically fostered for the first time. Are there any thoughts, and I know that this is not even the time to talk about, okay, well, can we kind of keep pushing the peace between Israel and different Arab countries, but are there any, continuing plans to maybe kind of resume in the near future on some of these?
Yeah, like I said, right now it's not the focus of our foreign policy in the region. At the same time, we still continue to support regional integration. We support an enhanced relationship and the establishment of diplomatic relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which we were working on before. We think it's in their best interest as well, but ultimately that's a decision for them to make. We'll facilitate, we'll help negotiate, but that's something that they would have to do when the time is right. And I will say that any future agreement of this sort is going to have to meaningfully address the Palestinian situation and lay a framework towards the creation, the establishment of a future Palestinian state.
Thank you so much, Adam Siegelman, for your time today.
Thank you very much.
شكرا لمتابعتكم مشاهدينا، إن شاء الله تكونوا استفدتوا من حلقة اليوم، وبنشوفكم بتقارير قادمة وأخبار وأيضا لقاءات حتحبوها وحتهمكم. باي.